Okay, sweet. Got it. Okay. Okay, everyone, it's 5 o'clock. This is the meeting. We are the ACM. This is our shape thing. Thank you for coming to the meeting today. We have Kyle's going to do a presentation based on some of his grad research in security, correct?
Security, adversarial thinking, and general purpose shenanigans.
Yeah, we're just gonna do some shenanigans, so hopefully we'll have a good time with that. So the first order of business is attendance, and basically just go to that QR code and enter your student ID so we can keep track of the attendance for the Kirby program board. So yeah, let me know if that doesn't work. Got it. Anyone need more time? Oh, yes, no?
I mean, I'm ready to go whenever
Well, I still have to do the announcements.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So, okay, let me know if you need that again, or if you're all good. Or Walker, do you need to take your attendance? People coming in? You need attendance?
Alright, I'm here.
Okay. All right, so if everyone's good with that, I'm gonna move on to the announcements. So we have 2 announcements. The first announcement is that Dr. Macklin is offering CS 4342 compiler design in the spring, and make sure to sign up. If I think for many people, registration is already open. You've taken compilers. Do you recommend it?
So my experience with compilers is that I learned how to code in like CS1, CS2, but I didn't learn what it means to code. Compiler design taught me in the most roundabout way possible what it means to code. So take that as you will.
All right, so there we go. That's open. The second announcement is that we have a poster presentation coming up. Students from CS 3541 and CS 4995 are presenting mobile app designs in a poster session Friday, December 9th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the Kirby Garage. And we have wide diversity of apps tackling issues such as social justice, stress, sleep, and more. Do you have a question?
What is a poster session?
So basically, students who design the apps for these classes are going to have like a poster where they're going to show some elements. They're going to be explaining what they did and everything. So it's basically kind of just like someone's going to be there and they'll just explain kind of what they did in the poster. Does that answer the question? Yeah, it's like a science fair. So yeah, so make sure to be there for that. Next thing is we have the Slack. If you're not in the Slack, we are posting all of our announcements and other shenanigans in the Slack. So I highly recommend joining the Slack. And we have the QR code for the Slack right there. So if anyone is not in the Slack and would like to join the Slack, I highly recommend that. There's a QR code. Minute for anyone. All right, is everyone good with that? Okay, that's all for that. So next order of business is you're gonna do your presentation.
Yep.
So how are we gonna do that with computers? You just use screen share. I'll stop screen sharing and use screen share. Okay.
Because I've got code I want to share, but I don't think I want to do that quite yet.
All right. Well, you just screen share when you get to that. Otherwise, just use my computer and don't try on this.
Yeah, I'll try. Your stuff's got mic and all that stuff, right? For
Yeah,
whoever
I
sounds
think
in.
it's working.
All right. Everyone knows what this is, or at least you should. You probably don't recognize what's going on inside, but we all know like the lock and key stuff. Like this is locked, pop the key in, it opens. But what if I wanted to open this without the key? Who knows how to do that?
Smack it.
Smack it. So I give it like a good old karate chop. Anyone else have anything?
Throw it on the ground.
This isn't mine, so I'm not going to do that. But maybe. What?
Screwdriver and bobby pins.
That sounds just like Skyrim. And there's a method that I know of where you take two wrenches, you put one on the base flat, and then you take the other one and you try to force it upwards. And I believe that's like the brute force method for doing this. But basically, this is kind of what we're talking about. But instead of like something physical, we're talking about your computers. So imagine, sort of not yet. There's code I want to show, but not quite yet, because I'm kind of doing this backwards. So imagine you're driving down, because I imagine most of us have cars or are driven or something like that. You get to a small town and they've got a speed camera at the beginning of the town and the end of town. And you want to speed through the town because you're driving 24 hours, something ridiculous. You don't want to be in the car any longer than you need to. How do you speed through the town without getting caught?
Go slow at the cameras.
Go slow at the cameras. That's pretty good. That would work.
Run over the cameras.
That could work if they're low, but if they're at like stop at like the red light cameras where they're up above, you'd have to have like a really tall car.
So sad.
So go so fast. So how fast are we talking? Like speed of light fast? That could work. What about if we just hopped out? Or yeah. You shoot the cameras. That's a really good one here in America. So what we could also do is we could probably get some spray paint. We could just spray paint the cameras. You could spray paint your license plate because they'll probably use that to figure out who you are. So then what about those manhole covers? Why are those round? Like why are they round and not square? Yeah. That's good. And me in particular, I'm not very strong, and those things probably weigh quite a lot because if they're what, solid metal, like iron or something. So one benefit of them getting around is you can easily roll them around, so you never have to pick them up. And all of you have taken CS1, CS2. So if I told you, get your laptops out, write a code that shoots some text out into a file, you could do that, right? I'm sure everyone could do that here. I mean, what the text going into that file, that's going to get tricky, but we could also essentially do that. Now, how do you take that and do something really bad with it? And this is where I want to share my screen. Let's see. So right here is Rust code, and you're probably not familiar with Rust, but I'll tell you what this does. This basically takes all the documents that I have in my current directory, and it looks for any Python files in particular. And if it finds a Python file, it's going to put in this line right here. It's going to put in my bad code. So if I run these Python scripts right now, what are they called? So I hope I don't get infected by a virus and it shoots out 4. So let's see what's going on. It's just a couple print statements. That's not too bad. But as we learned from compilers, tie-in for compilers here. So this string is basically just code, or at least Python is. So we'll talk about executable stuff kind of later, but this is simple. We can all see this. We know what's going on here. And there's also another file, and it's totally fine. Nothing's wrong with this. So I'm going to run my totally legitimate file called virus. I hope everyone can see this. Nothing happened. Does anyone want to guess what happened?
Is that put that text into your Python file?
So now all of a sudden it's shooting out ls for in the directory. So let's take a look. Oh man, file 2 has this string of text added into it. Now, this code doesn't seem too bad, but if I wanted it to be really bad, then it could be. Like I could have a fork bomb in here, which would eat up all your resources and then pretty much force your system to reboot. And it also executes the virus again. So that means that if I were to move this file into a different directory, it would look for all the Python files. Although technically that would break because bad design of this virus, and we'll talk about that later. But it would look for all the Python files, and it would go, okay, I'm going to add this text into the Python file. Who sees how this could be used in a really bad way? Like, instead of limiting it to the current directory, what if we did the entire machine? Everything I had access to currently. So that way, if me as a user were to make a mistake, assuming this is like an actually malicious virus, then I would just have to make one slip up and my entire system, like my compilers, my super secret password files, shadow files, all that very secretive stuff that you don't want people to see, all that stuff can get leaked out, and that would be very bad. So why does it not work if it's in a separate directory? Well, it requires the virus executable.
I was going to ask, how would you get your virus to execute without having like the user type in run the virus?
That is a great question. And I'm going to try and get to that a bit later. But one of the bad things about this virus is that it's not self-replicating. It requires this code in particular, the executable. It's basically a snake, and if you cut the head off, it's basically done. It's not going to do anything. In fact, it might actually crash the code that you're normally trying to run, and that'll probably tell you that something's up. Now, one thing else it does is that it shoots a comment at the very last line. Now, why does it do this? If it didn't do this, then there's no guarantee that what I'm looking at in every file is infected, because I don't want to reinfect already infected files. If I did that, then me, who's just kind of messing around with my system, they might realize that there actually is a virus on here. And as someone who's making a virus, we wouldn't want that to happen. Imagine if we're trying to rob a bank, but we're trying to do it through software, because the drilling and all that stuff, that's really hard. So how do we make this virus better? How do we make this virus more malicious?
Delete the operating.
That's good, but deleting the operating system requires privileges. So how do we just make this virus better individually to help us get to that point? So how do we make it so this thing's no longer a snake? It no longer has a head. There we go. So instead of this bad code or whatever, keep in mind this is written in Rust. So I'm targeting Python files, but I don't really need to. I could put in clauses for Perl scripts or general scripts. I could do executable code, and I could put that at the top. So it runs my virus before it actually runs the stuff that you want. And that is how we can get someone to actually run this thing. If someone were to download free movies, whatever, what's a new movie that people like? We can put it at the beginning. But if someone were to download it and then run it, we could probably fit in at the very beginning and try to get something to work, and then we get their system. But if instead of this bad code, like, because this isn't that great, we could have Python code that is the virus. So that way, whenever this Python code gets run, it reruns the virus, and the virus is itself. So then how do you defend against something like that? When you just have files that just get turned infected and it's silent, you can't tell which one's which.
Antivirus.
That's good, but how do we make an antivirus software? Oh,
Recognize patterns
Recognize patterns. What pattern do I use here? I can also show you the first file.
You mark it.
I mark it. I mark it with my virus. And the easiest way to do this is if we did a checksum of this file. So if we held in a web server our legitimate file, and a checksum is, have all of you taken CS2? So you've seen like hash tables. So are you familiar with modulo?
Yes.
So what's 11 mod 10? 1. So a checksum is basically that, but on a very big scale. Like what's 8 trillion something million, blah, 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 blah. Mod some other really big number. It's going to be pretty crazy, and we don't really know how to do that off the bat. So we get a computer to do it for us, because that's the computer science solution, because we don't want to do anything yucky. We want to get a computer to do it for us. So we have a program have a checksum of itself, the legitimate copy. I believe I can actually do this with that is disappointing. And I did not prepare for this. So there we go. So that long string is a hash. And this isn't a good hash for checksums because we want checksums to be quick and fast. But basically what this entire string is FD blah, 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 blah. That is the file. Like everything in the file, about the file, it's all there. It's all stored as that. And we can actually use this, because if I change one thing about file, suppose I get rid of my virus and I decide to rerun it, it is entirely different. Instead of the FD, we have the DB something, and it is much different. And we can use this to our advantage. Because since we mark the files, we can have a checksum of the program by itself. And then if it ever gets infected, then the checksums won't match up. So that's pretty easy. What's the problem with this approach?
If you update the file.
If I update the file, I would have to change the checksum. But I think there's an even better solution. Very closely related. Because remember, we're modifying files.
They just modify every file differently.
That could do something. But if I'll show off the checksum for file 2. So file 2, this is the infected file 2. The checksum is completely different. And I'll get rid of the virus in file 2. And I'll do it again. And one of the things about hashes and checksums is that the expected values from these. So we have the 7CA1C. There's no rhyme or reason. So the difference in files makes the huge difference in the hashes. I'm not used to talking this long. So the hashes are supposed to be very different from each other, just given one small difference. So for instance, I've got 131C in file 2. I just add a 1. That is massively different, the A2EF. And there's the whole other thing that goes into it. So while yes, modifying each file differently could work to throw someone off our trail, it's not the best solution. Because if we're storing the hash of our program in the program, what's the problem with that?
They can just overwrite the hash.
Exactly. So then we could do something like, oh, we'll just request it from a server then, because that way the server has it and not the program. So that way if the program gets overwritten, then it won't know. But then all I would have to do as the virus writer is just go, oh yeah, I don't want to request from that server. I want to request from my malicious server that's over here. And I'm the bad guy server, and I have the actual infected checksum code. You see, this weird back and forth, this is basically the arms race in security. And so as a security professional, they should be expected to be able to have this like split mindset. And this is usually called the security mindset, but there's a better term for it. It's adversarial thinking. It's where you think as the bad guy and you try to figure out how to defend from the theoretical bad guy that you're thinking of. The entire point of the beginning stuff, like the driving through the little town, that's adversarial thinking. You're trying to come up with ways to beat the system. Why do you want to beat the system? So that way you know the vulnerabilities, you know how to patch it. And if you can't patch it, then you can just watch the vulnerabilities. Like, oh, if someone's speeding past the camera, but then they stop for lunch, and then they go speeding again. Well, you could have another speeding camera, like a block down or a block ahead, to see if they're actually speeding. I mean, that's not perfect, but nothing in security really is perfect. It's more because attacks only get better. And that's the thing with this virus, is that we've constantly been like bouncing ideas off each other, where it's like, oh yeah, this would be a better way for this virus. Then how do we protect against it? It's this huge back and forth. And this is security in a nutshell. So I've got this whole virus. It's nothing special. What does this really mean? I mean, if someone really wanted to infect my files, like they could like just put something on a flash drive, drop it in front of my office, and if I put it in my computer, then I'm straight out of luck. Like, what am I gonna do about that? Like, if I put in a malicious USB drive that I don't know is malicious, because I think it's one of my own. I've got like 12. I don't know what they have on them. I plug it in. I get pwned. How can I stop that?
Antivirus software.
What if it's just a capacitor on a USB thing? So if I put it in, fries the motherboard. But what if I want to actually see, like, what if I want to use my USB drives though?
Plug them in somewhere else.
That is the answer we're looking for. Because if I have multiple machines, then I can just have one machine do all my risky stuff. So that way, the machine I actually care about, that it can get pwned, anything can happen. I don't really care about that one machine because that's just a filler. There's an air gap between my testing machine and my actual machine. So I said previously that there's secret files that exist that you don't want to leak out. And one of these is, let's see if I remember it. Oh, I have to use sudo. Let's see, it is Etsy. So what is it? It's, oh, here we go. So the password file historically actually had the password saved in a hash. This seems kind of bad. And it really was at the time. Like, you could, I don't think I need sudo for the passwords file. So what am I looking at here? And this is one of the more sensitive files on a machine. Although it's not super sensitive because it contains necessary information. Anything that's a user is in this file. So we have, I assume your experience with Linux, so we see root. Let's see, we've got necessary stuff. Let's see, oh, here's my user right here. So why can I see this file without needing special permissions?
Encrypted.
It's not. Close. Although this is more of an operating systems question. If you've taken OS with Peterson, he talks about your view permissions. Yeah, this is necessary information. But why is this X here? Because historically, this file actually stored the password as a hash, and it would go right there. So why is it not there? Because my virus, even being really bad, I could easily modify it so I could shoot out this file. And then from that hash, I could just go, oh yeah, I know how to calculate one hash. So I know how to calculate two hashes. How do I calculate a lot of hashes? By calculating one after another. What am I using that's really good at doing one thing right after another? So then we just have to check the output hash to the original hash. And it doesn't matter what their password is. We're just searching for something that the hash thinks the password is. So let's see where those hashes moved. Notice I'm using sudo because this file actually requires permissions. Right here. This entire line. That hash contains my password. And it is 4 characters, I'll have you know. And that is not very secure. Do you want to know why I bank on a 4-character password for my machine? Because I trust that this machine will always be close to me. And then if anyone tries to steal it, well, they just couldn't. Because I'm sure all of us here are mostly honest people. Oh yeah, if anyone wants pizza, go for it. If someone could get me a cup of soda or something, because my throat's really dry.
What do you want?
It doesn't matter. So here's my take-home assignment as you're getting pizza. Crack this hash and figure out what my password is. I believe it is SHA-256.
Read the other stuff around it.
It's only 4 characters.
It's 4 characters. Although I do not recommend actually posting my password anywhere because it is technically profanity. There is a big hint for you. Because my machine is, the primary user is data. The machine's called recovery, and it's a 4-character password that I just said is profanity. So you don't really need to know how to do the hash stuff because you can get a lot of hints and then you just put them all together. And just knowing it's 4 characters in profanity, well, there's only so many things that are like that. There's what, 7 words that are like that?
What, 7 curse words?
Yeah, probably more.
Kyle, are you just telling everyone how to crack your machine?
I mean, this is part of adversarial thinking, though.
Is it SHA-256?
I believe so. So if you do, I'm not going to do it because my screen's up there. So you can feel free to do it on yours and see if you get the hash. But I will not because I don't want my screen's being shared right now too.
And recorded.
So who knows what children could be watching this later on. So then this is a very sensitive thing. So then why am I showing it to you? Because then like, all I know, someone could break into my office.
You're misleading us.
Like I've got a key to my office on me right now. And you can 3D print a key and it can fit fairly well into a
I
lock.
could also hit you with a $5 wrench and drug you and then take your keys.
Because that would be much easier than actually going through the process of 3D printing a key for one use. Because hackers love the path of least resistance. Because why bother brute forcing a password if they could just find out who has the password, capture them, and just hold a gun against their head and just go, give me your password or I'm going to shoot you. It's easier to do something like that if suppose we're going after like a huge organization. Like suppose we want the nuclear launch codes. like very high stakes, huge, because high stakes. What's easier, trying to break into all the software that they have? Because it's got to be layers. It's going to be layers upon layers of software defended by the most brilliant minds probably available. Or would it be easier to just find someone who has access to it and then torture them to get information from them?
We usually just like return class and send them like a fake email.
Fake emails.
Yeah, fake emails.
That happens a lot. You get the, what is it, like the Nigerian prince saying, oh yeah, give me $200 and I will give you 10K in return. And we all kind of know about the Nigerian prince like email scams. They're usually badly worded and they're probably riddled with spelling mistakes. So why do those still get sent out?
Because they work.
They work. People fall for them.
Because there's so many of them, and they're so easy to send. If even a couple of people just answer.
Yep.
Because it's not a lot to just send around.
Especially people who don't know a lot about computers or anything like that, so fall for it a lot easier.
Because we're all CS people in this room. I assume we are. If we're not, then they're going to be technically minded, like engineer or something like that, or they're interested in computer security for whatever reason. I'm gonna stop displaying my hash. So good luck with that. So a lot of people aren't CS people. So, and suppose it costs about a penny to send an email. Like, assume that's like electricity costs or like processing costs. So 1 cent isn't a whole lot. And we could send what, like 10,000 emails pretty easily. Because that'd be what, like $100, just right out the gate, just somewhere around there, 100, maybe 1,000. Well, all we need is one person to recoup all those costs and then some. So why not do it? Especially since it's easy. So we just have to go for it.
What about people that might be specifically targeted? So if they know that you're in a sensitive position, it might not be, the badly worded email. It might actually be very sophisticated.
That's a good point. And I had a thought experiment recently with Walker right over there.
I don't remember this, but
So you know how Janus and like the CS dev machines, they're very powerful machines. You know what takes up a lot of processing power? Video games. And the system administrator, Jim, he would not install Steam on any of those machines. In fact, if I went up and asked him, he would say, no, not doing that. Not ever, no. But if you're familiar with Linux, you can also build packages locally. This is the whole essence behind an LFS or Linux from scratch, is that you basically build programs locally, and then you use a bunch of these small programs to make a full operating system. Well, you can use these same principles to build something like Steam. So you could build it locally, but it would be really hard to do so because there's a lot of dependencies. So you'd have to do every single dependency for Steam in order to get Steam to run on any of those machines. You know what would be easier? If we looked up a package that actually had like educational value, but it shared a lot of dependencies with Steam. And then we went up to Jim and said, hey, Jim, can you install this very educational package? Because we want to do whatever. We want to do 3D printing stuff. And we have so we could have a 3D printing repo that actually has dependencies for Steam in it. And if we told Jim, oh yeah, we want this one in particular, so that way we can do our totally legitimate 3D printing, where I totally 3D print a key to go in this lock, even though it doesn't technically fit because 3D printer limitations. And the key is very bendy, so you wouldn't want to put this in a key anyway. I hope you can see this from far away, but this is not what a key should look like. I mean, if you want, we can pass this around. There's probably greasy hands everywhere, but Yeah, so you know how bendy they can be if you don't do it right. And you'd have to do materials, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, back to Steam. So if we can get most of the dependencies loaded onto the machine, then it would make it a lot easier in order to install Steam on it. So then what do? We've got two options. We've got the hard way that's guaranteed, or we have an easy way that's less guaranteed, but it's much easier if it works out for us. So what do?
Depends on if he looks through it. Actually investigates what he's putting on the machine.
That's true. But then suppose it's an actually legitimate like package that just happens to share some dependencies with Steam. Like it just so happens to share some of the hard ones that we can't really build either. Then what do? You have an easy way. It's still kind of hard, but it's much easier than the hard way. But the hard way is guaranteed. So what do?
Easy way.
Easy way. Why?
It's easy.
It's
You can do
easy.
it more times, you can try it more times.
You can try it more times. Attackers love this principle, the path of least resistance. Because when I showed you my password, I did it assuming that that would not be the easy way to break into my machine. The easy way to break into my machine would be to steal it from me, take the hard drive out, and then steal everything off the hard drive. That would be the easy way. I think my screen just went to sleep. 4-character password. But anyway, the important stuff. There's no screws in the back covering all the important stuff right now. You could just pop it off, take the hard drive out. You would have it. You would have everything you wanted. Personal problem. I want to keep the screws out because it's kind of an ongoing thing, but the important part is that there's no screws in it. You could just pop it right off, take the hard drive, and then you'd have everything you want.
Or if there were screws, you could just get a screwdriver.
Or you could just get a screwdriver. That's a lot easier than trying to break into my machine from EDU roam or something. I mean, have any of you tried to do like, I'm not saying to do this, take a networking class. They cover everything about what's legal and not. But have you looked into how hard it is to do like a man in the middle attack and stuff like that? It's pretty complicated. You need the know-how. You need to be able to trick people. That's hard. Or you could just take the easy way out, steal the machine, and then just put it back in quietly. I mean, if it's in a secure room, like say it's back there. You know what you do? I would try to bribe a janitor, open the door for me. Or just say, oh yeah, I locked my keys back there. Can you open the door for me? Something like that. Now, why is that the easier way? Path of least resistance. But why through a person? Wouldn't they be like skeptical that someone might be trying to break in though?
No, people are like, look. You're more convincing in person.
You're more convincing in person. People are stupid. People are forgetful. Who here has used the I forgot my password or like the password reset function? Like, has anyone used that? Because I've used that. We've all used that. But you want to know what the problem with that is? If I know your email, and that's not hard to get, there's database leaks all the time, then I could just use that email, try to figure out what your password is, or just change your email, and then go, oh no, I forgot my password with the email I totally just didn't replace. So even though that is a vulnerability, it's still there because they tend to be the weak link in the chain. Like, it's not crazy. So it's 40 minutes in. That's basically most of my security rant. It's more of like a prelude to the security class taught by Peterson and adversarial thinking, which is kind of what I'm working on. And what I'm working on is kind of very theoretical, and that's boring. So are there any questions about security stuff and my rant?
How do they go about it if they were gonna target a specific person? Because this does happen, especially if they they might even research a person. It might not be like such a, you know what I mean?
Yes. So even though it's hard, you can still do it. Like even if you have to take the hard way, it'll take ages, but it happens. You can do it. It's a lot easier if you have someone behind you funding you, like take like the Russian hackers, that kind of thing. I mean, if you're state sponsored or someone's paying your bills, then why not do the hard way? Because I mean, you're gonna come up with an attack that's probably gonna work on most, if not all, machines, like a 0-day or something. If you find one like that, then you're sweeping the whole place for at least a month. I mean, month is I threw that around kind of loosely because there's still places using Windows 95. Still, there's probably like power companies that are running it that need to update their stuff. This thing happens.
Manufacturing, that's a big one.
Manufacturing power companies.
So it's like, what happens like if you get caught? Get like charged or like happens?
It depends on where you are. So ideally, you don't want to be in the country you're hacking. This is why the Russian hacker idea is such a strong idea. Because who's the #1 enemy of the US right now? China, Russia, North Korea, somewhere over there. And we don't have great relations with them. So if someone does get caught from there, hacking into like the NSA or something, we could go up to China and go, oh, hey, we want this person to come to the United States so they can stay on trial. What's China gonna say? They're probably gonna ignore it. Nothing's gonna happen. So if you're in a place like that, attacking somewhere like that, why not go for the hard stuff? You can go for specific people. You could go after Google. You could do all this crazy stuff that we see in the news. Like there was the oil pipeline attack. I don't remember who actually caused that. So someone could probably tell me who actually did it.
Have you actually made a virus and put it like practice on like a just I don't know. Yeah, like that's it.
The Turlab is great if you want to do stuff like that. And that's what I would recommend.
Have you?
Yes. Although it was much better than this, but it still wasn't perfect. But you have to remember the idea is that most attacks are random. Like, yes, the specific person does happen, and there are focused attacks. Like Google's a very high value target. Password managers online, like 1Pass and whatever else there is. Those are huge targets. If you could break into there, that's huge. But ultimately, the easiest way to break into a computer is to just go, all right, we have this one attack that we know works on, say, 25%. Suppose it's log4j. It only works on outdated versions of Java. But if it works on like 25%, why not like go up to like each computer and go log4j, 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 and just try it out. If it doesn't work, no biggie, you go on to the next one. There's a lot of computers out there. There's the, what figure is it? 4 billion devices run Java? Some huge number. And that was from Java's website years ago. It's probably even more now. Because how many devices are there? I've got 2 right here with me right now. I've got my laptop, I've got my phone. I'm sure all of you have something similar with a laptop and a phone. So that's a lot of devices. Smartwatches too.
The AirPods count?
They could, yeah. But that's a lot of devices. So why not just go through all those devices, see if anything's weak? If anything's weak, you can probably easily break into it.
Are you suggesting I hack into my Samsung fridge?
If it's your fridge and you have your permission, then you can go for it. That's the important thing, is that while you can think like an attacker, like a bad guy in this case, doesn't mean you should do it. The whole point of the adversarial thinking is to consider what the attacker will do and their most easily accessible thing. Like, what are they most likely to do? Because the easiest way is probably the way they're going to do, because it's easy. If if a Russian hacker wanted to target me in particular, like anonymous or something, they're going to leak my data. It's just a matter of time. Like if they're that determined, it's going to happen. So, any other questions?
Well, like in the real life example, like, a lot of burglaries, like, isn't about, oh, they're not gonna break in, it's like deterring them from breaking in. Like, that's the whole point of like having a neighborhood watch or something, like watching for people that like aren't usually in the area. Like I saw an interview on YouTube like a year or two ago about this burglar that got caught, and he had a couple interviewing him, and he was talking about how effective neighborhood watches were. Just like, you know, because a lot of times he'd go up, he'd like pretend he was jogging, right? And then he's scoping out the house, and he'd go up, literally pound on the door. And if he heard a single sound that someone was home, he'd just walk away. But like if he kept on pounding on the door, there was no answer. Like he would try the door, he would try to break in or whatever. So like it's more of a, I think it's more of a game of deterrence than like anything actually trying to stop. If that makes sense.
Yes. That's the number one takeaway, is lock your doors and just do the simple stuff. Because if it's hard to do the really easy way, like if your door's locked, then it's hard for someone to just open the door, walk in, and steal your TV. They'd have to like go to the window if you're in like a normal house, break the window. That's hard, that's messy, makes a lot of sound, they might get caught. There's a lot of ifs there. That's it's not perfect for them. And that's really the whole gist of security, is make it not easy. Just don't make it easy. If it's hard, then make it take as long as possible. Like I said, anonymous might target me. It's just a matter of time. But that's the key thing. It's a matter of time. I just have to keep them going at me for a long time until they go, you know what? It's just not worth it. This is some nobody from Florida in Minnesota. Why bother? Any other questions?
So that's an example of like making it a long time to hash. Don't make the hashes work too fast, make them longer. And then if somebody had the hash, like a rainbow table, it would take longer, right?
So the hash I showed most likely wasn't a single run. You'd have to probably run 1,000 hashes on the password, and then you would take the first hash, and then you would hash that, and then you get a different hash. And then you do that about 1,000 times or so, plus or minus a few more thousand. Like, say, like 8,000 times running that. Because the single hash, that was really fast, right? But that's, so, like, suppose like 0.01 second. I could probably do the time on my machine, go, let's see. It'd be time, and then 2, 5, 6. Let's do A. Some. This is why you use tabs. It wants a file. I'm just gonna give it the. So it took 0.005 seconds. So that's not a lot. But what if we did the hash on this 1,000,000 times? That would take a lot longer. And if I stored my hash in that file as 1,000,000 times, then that would mean you'd have to spend seconds on every single combination. And since I told you it's 4 characters, and if I didn't tell you it's profanity, then you would have to go through every single 4-character word, which isn't a lot. But since it's seconds, you'd spend seconds on each one. And that's just, at what point is it not worth it? If it took an hour to do it, just for like this weird one-off bit, would it be worth it?
Would you instead want to test like only viable words, like whole words, like 4-letter words? Like if there was a database of just 4-letter words that are in the dictionary?
Since you know this is a dictionary word, because I told you, assume I didn't tell you it's profanity, it's just a 4-letter word. Then yeah, you could cut down on the size of 4-letter things to 4-letter words, and that would be faster. And that's basically how brute forcing is done, is that you try to figure out how to limit your possibilities. Because an 8-character password, That could be anything. There's a lot of things with 8 characters. And if you go to 16 or 24, that's crazy amounts. Like that would take who knows how long. You'd have to run GPUs to brute force that kind of thing. Not even like normal CPU, because that would take years. But it would take much longer. I'd have to use expensive hardware. Why would I do that? I mean, I know whose password it is. I could just hit them with a $5 wrench until they tell me. That's part of the, when you saw the poster thing, it was the XKCD. Why should I build a very expensive cluster that's going to cost millions and millions of dollars to do this one thing? Or I could just drug them, hit them with a $5 wrench until they tell me. Path of least resistance. Any other questions? Because I'm hungry. I haven't eaten in a while, so. Well, if there's no more questions, this is my security rant, I guess. Less than talk, more of a rant.